There's a detail about Shedeur Sanders that the entire NFL conversation has been sleeping on. Not his arm talent, not his draft stock, not the Cleveland depth chart drama that's been running in circles for months. Something smaller, something that came out quietly on a podcast, got treated like a cute family anecdote, and then got completely buried under the noise of everything else. But once you actually hear it, and more importantly, once you understand what it means, it reframes everything. His composure, his confidence, his ability to walk into hostile press rooms and hostile organizations and look like none of it touches him. It all connects to one thing, and it has nothing to do with football. Shedeur Sanders is a millionaire. That needs to be established up front, because the story that follows isn't about financial struggle, it's actually the opposite. He has his own contracts, his own brand deals, his own name recognition that generates serious income. He could write a check for an apartment complex today and not lose sleep over it. So when you find out that his father, Deion Sanders, still pays his rent, still buys every suit he wears, and has purchased every single car Shedeur has ever owned, the natural reaction is to laugh it off. Rich kid, famous dad, classic spoiling. That's where most people stopped. That's exactly where they got it wrong. Because here's what actually happened when this came up. A fan asked Shedeur directly on his podcast, "Does your dad still buy your suits?" Simple question, the kind that would make a lot of professional athletes with something to prove get a little stiff. Project independence, redirect the conversation, laugh it off with a "nah, I handle my own thing now." That's the move when you're trying to protect an image. Shedeur didn't do any of that. Without a pause, without a flicker of discomfort, he said yes, his father picks the styles, his father makes the calls on what he wears. And Shedeur doesn't just tolerate it, he said he genuinely enjoys it. Not out of obligation, not because he has to, because he actually wants that connection with his father. That answer, delivered with zero defensiveness from a young man who has every reason to perform independence, tells you something significant about his psychological foundation before you even get to the deeper layer of what he said next. And what he said next is where it gets interesting. Because Shedeur didn't just confirm that his dad buys his suits and pays his rent, he went further and drew a line, one he drew himself without being prompted. He made a clear distinction between what his father gives him and what his father doesn't. He said Deion doesn't buy him what he wants, he buys him what he needs. And then Shedeur said something that should have stopped people cold, that Deion has gotten tight, disciplined, measured. That if Shedeur wants something beyond what's necessary, he has to put himself in the financial position to get it on his own. That's not a spoiled athlete talking. That's someone who has been handed structure, not excess. Someone whose father made a very deliberate decision about how to use his resources and what message that sends. To understand why Deion made that choice, you have to think about what Deion Sanders has actually lived through. This is a man who arrived in the NFL as one of the most electrifying personalities the league had ever seen, made enormous money, built an image that touched every corner of culture, and still found himself staring down financial and personal chaos before he found solid ground again. He has talked publicly about what it cost him, the excess, the pressure to perform a version of success that looked good from the outside while the inside was fracturing. Deion Sanders did not emerge from that period of his life and decide to hand his son a limitless credit card and a lifestyle with no friction. He emerged from it with a very specific understanding of what actually protects a young man in a world that will try to consume him. And it isn't giving him everything he asks for, it's giving him stability, consistency, and a foundation that doesn't move. So when people see Deion still paying rent for an NFL quarterback, they're seeing the surface. What's underneath is a man who knows exactly what financial chaos feels like from the inside and has made a quiet, deliberate choice to make sure his son never has to find out. That choice looks different from the outside than it does from the inside. From the outside, it looks like dependency. From the inside, from where Shedeur is standing, it functions as something else entirely. It's a signal that never changes, no matter what happens in the NFL, no matter what a front office decides about his future, no matter what a reporter says into a microphone about whether he's earned anything. There is one constant: the foundation doesn't shift. The rent gets paid, the suits get chosen, everything stays exactly the same. And for a 22-year-old navigating one of the most unstable environments a young athlete can find himself in, that constant isn't small, it's everything. Because here's what Shedeur's last 12 months in the NFL actually looked like. Draft night was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became one of the more bizarre and, let's be honest, troubling sequences in recent draft history. Teams passed on him round after round in ways that defied the football logic that had surrounded him coming out of Colorado. Character attacks emerged from sources that never fully identified themselves. Rumors circulated with no real foundation, and when the dust settled, a quarterback who by most evaluations had the talent and the resume to go in the first 2 rounds ended up as a 5th-round selection. The NFL world spent weeks trying to explain it, dissect it, assign blame for it. Through all of it, Shedeur Sanders sat in front of cameras and looked like someone watching a weather report about a city he didn't live in. Then Cleveland, which added its own particular brand of chaos, a quarterback competition that has never fully stabilized under him, despite multiple opportunities pointing in his direction. An organization that has sent mixed signals about its commitment to him, even while he's been outperforming the narrative. Media cycles that flip weekly. One week the angle is that the pressure is getting to him, the next week the angle shifts entirely when that prediction doesn't pan out. A fan base that is passionate and vocal and hasn't always been welcoming. Any one of those things in isolation would be enough to get inside the head of a young quarterback still trying to establish himself. All of them at once, piling on top of each other over the course of a year, would break a lot of people. Not in a dramatic, obvious way, in the quieter way that starts to show up in press conference answers, in body language, in the way a player starts to carry tension in situations where he used to be loose. That slow erosion. Shedeur hasn't shown it. People have a lot of theories about why. The ones who like him say it's maturity. The ones who don't say it's arrogance, that he's too unbothered because he doesn't actually care about winning, that his confidence is really just detachment dressed up nicely. Some say it's the media training, that he's been coached on how to present himself and he's just executing the playbook well. Those explanations all have something in common. They're looking at Shedeur as an isolated individual and trying to explain his psychology from the inside out. That's the wrong direction. The explanation isn't inside him, it's outside him. It's been there the whole time, hiding in a detail about rent checks and tailored suits that everyone dismissed as a fun family story. Real composure, the kind that holds under sustained, genuine pressure, not just the manageable kind, doesn't come from confidence alone. Confidence can be rattled. Confidence is responsive to outcomes, to criticism, to the way an organization treats you, to whether the people around you believe in what you're doing. What can't be rattled the same way is security, and not financial security, which fluctuates with contracts and business decisions and market shifts. Relational security, the knowledge, deep and unshakable, that there is at least one person in your world whose position on you has never been conditional on your performance, your draft position, your depth chart status, or whether the Cleveland front office has figured out what they have. That kind of security doesn't respond to outside pressure the way confidence does. It doesn't rise and fall with the news cycle. It just sits there, steady, and it gives you something to stand on when everything else is moving. For Shedeur Sanders, that person is Deion, and the rent and the suits aren't just nice gestures from a caring father. They're a message delivered on a consistent schedule, without drama, without conditions, without any reference to what's happening in Cleveland that week. The message is the same every time. I see you. I'm here. Nothing that happens out there changes this. That's what Shedeur is standing on when he walks into a hostile press conference after a rough week and answers every question without flinching. That's what's underneath the poise that analysts keep marveling at and then misattributing to the wrong source. He isn't performing calm, he has access to it, because someone made sure he would. And this is precisely what Cleveland, the national media, and everyone else who's spent the last year trying to find the crack in Shedeur Sanders keeps missing. They are attempting to destabilize someone who is already, at the most fundamental level, stable. They are trying to create doubt in a young man who has been told, not once, not occasionally, but consistently, through action rather than words, that he is taken care of regardless. You cannot manufacture insecurity in someone like that by questioning his draft position. You cannot erode his confidence by cycling through quarterback competition narratives. You cannot get to him through a reporter's hot take or a fan base's impatience. The thing they need to reach to actually shake him is the thing that isn't accessible from the outside. It's been protected quietly, consistently, through a father who never wavered once. That's why every narrative built against Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland has had a shelf life. They arrive, they generate noise, they dominate the conversation for a news cycle or two, and then they fade. Not because the pressure wasn't real, but because the person they're aimed at has a foundation that pressure can't get traction on. The critics keep throwing weight at a structure that was engineered specifically to hold it, not by accident. Not because Shedeur is some rare psychological anomaly, because a man who has been through enough to know exactly what he was building, built it on purpose, piece by piece, suit by suit, rent check by rent check, over years. Think about the patience that requires from a parenting standpoint. Deion Sanders does not need to pay his son's rent. He is not doing it out of financial necessity on either side of that equation. He is doing it because he made a decision at some point, maybe consciously, maybe instinctively, that the most valuable thing he could give his son wasn't more money, or more freedom, or more latitude to build his own independent life entirely. It was constancy, the experience of something in his life that does not respond to external pressure the way everything else does. In a world where Shedeur's value as a human being is being publicly debated and revised on a weekly basis by people who have never met him, there is one corner of his life where his value has never been up for debate, where the calculation never changes, where nothing he does on a football field, or fails to do, alters the equation in any direction. That corner is Deion. And it shows up in how Shedeur moves through the world in a way that is genuinely difficult to manufacture artificially. You can teach an athlete media training, you can coach press conference answers, you can build someone up with motivational language and team support structures and mental performance coaches. None of that produces what Shedeur has. What he has isn't a skill, it's a condition. A state of being that developed over years inside a specific family dynamic shaped by a father who understood from painful personal experience what it looks like when a young man with talent and money and fame doesn't have anything solid underneath him. Deion decided that would not be Shedeur's story, and he structured an entire system, quietly, without press releases, visible only in the small details of who pays what and who chooses the suits, to make sure of it. The part of this that should land hardest for anyone watching Shedeur's career unfold is this: the opponents in this situation, and there have been opponents, people and institutions actively invested in seeing him fail or stumble or break, are fighting a battle they don't fully understand. They're targeting the surface, the performance, the output. What they need to get to, if they ever want to actually affect him, is the root. And the root isn't something they can touch. It was planted and tended long before Shedeur ever took an NFL snap by someone who knew exactly what it would need to withstand. So the next time you watch Shedeur Sanders handle a difficult press conference question, or absorb another week of Cleveland quarterback competition noise, or respond to another round of media speculation about whether he belongs, remember what you know now. The suits didn't come from a stylist. The car didn't come from a signing bonus splurge. The rent isn't paid because he can't afford it. All of it comes from the same source, delivered the same way on the same terms, regardless of what the NFL world decided about him that week. And that consistency, unremarkable from the outside, invisible to most of the analysts covering him, buried under a dozen louder storylines, is the single most important factor in who Shedeur Sanders is as a competitor. Not his release, not his football IQ, not his pedigree, the fact that one person never moved. That's the armor. That's what every pressure campaign for the last year has been bouncing off of without understanding why. That's the story the NFL conversation missed entirely when it was busy debating draft positions and depth charts and whether a fifth-round grade was a slight or a conspiracy or something in between. The actual story was never about any of that. It was about a father and a son, a rent check, and a message that never changed. And as long as that message stays the same, Shedeur Sanders is going to keep being the calmest person in every room the NFL puts him in, whether that room is ready for him or not. The question worth sitting with after all of this is whether the foundation Deion built for Shedeur is something that can carry him through to the outcome it was designed for. Because one thing is clear, it has already carried him further into hostile territory than most people expected, without leaving a mark. Whether Cleveland ultimately becomes the stage that story deserves is still being written, but the man standing at the center of it, he was built for exactly this, and the blueprint was drawn by someone who already survived a version of it himself.